is it just me? Because it feels like everyone out there is a comic book seller or a dealer.
Guys, so I found this comic in my grandma's basement and it's really old, so I'm pretty sure it costs a lot of money. eBay, here I come.
Superman #1 from 1939 sold for $2 million? That's crazy. I bet the Death of Superman has to sell for at least half that. Let's get this money.
All right, we are opening our online store today. It is the first Monday in January. Let's make it happen. We have skinny jeans, pink Afghan, I don't know what that is, and my brother's old comic book. Can probably get $1 or $2 for that. Let's see.
What we are seeing right now in many ways is a byproduct of the fact that comic book values and prices are sky high. People are taking advantage of the situation to cash out, to make some money, and or to fund purchases themselves. Don't get me wrong, I don't think that there's anything wrong with this, but it's important that we recognize that this is the reality. I technically have created videos on this channel in which I help people to understand how they can make the hobby fund itself. So I am definitely not condemning this type of behavior. So why did I create this video? I wanted to put this video together to remind everyone out there that not all sellers are created equally. There are novice and seasoned sellers out there that do a fantastic job of completing transactions and taking care of their customers. There are both seasoned and novice sellers out there that don't necessarily know what it takes to properly complete a transaction, which leads to a lot of frustration. In other cases, there are sellers out there that are doing some things that aren't necessarily on the up and up in order to separate you from your hard-earned money. With that said, in this video, I wanted to try to provide some practical tips and pointers that may help you to avoid catching a bad deal or a brick, as I like to call it. Tip number 1 is to remember that one man's treasure is another man's trash. Put another way, just because someone has a comic that you want doesn't mean that they treasure that comic the same way that you do. So to that point, we shouldn't necessarily assume that every single seller out there cares about comics the same way that you do, because they may not. They may have acquired these comics through inheritance. They may have found them. And so we should not assume that they are as knowledgeable about the hobby as we are and understand things like how to properly ship a comic. So it's important for you to own the transaction to make sure that you can get through it smoothly. Tip number 2, not all selling platforms are created equally. Some platforms like eBay and Instagram allow any and everyone to join and to sell. However, we've seen websites and also apps that are dedicated to collectibles that have a higher thresholds. Some of these platforms actually have a screening process and also seller criteria that do a lot to help separate out the bad actors from the other people. And while this is not 100% protective, it does go a long way to giving you some assurance that sellers on these platforms are a little more reputable and maybe even a little more knowledgeable because they have a higher threshold to cross. And regardless of the platform, you have to own the process and make sure that you can get through the transaction as successfully as possible. Tip number 3 is to not over-index a seller's past track record. Oftentimes we rely on a seller's feedback score, their reputation, or books that they previously sold as some assurance that they are solid sellers. This isn't wrong, but we have to remember that sellers are people and people change and evolve. They have setbacks, they have good days and bad days. For these reasons, you have to remember to ask a lot of questions. Again, you own the transaction, and so you have to ask questions to make sure that you are going about this in the right way. Tip number 4 is to ask for evidence. As the Russian proverb says, trust but verify. I've actually seen and heard instances in which sellers are actually using photo filters, filters that improve the appearance of a comic that is being sold. The question is, are these folks trying to mislead people, or are they trying to give a comic some curb appeal? If you believe that a seller may be using a filter of some sort, it's okay to ask for additional unfiltered photos because, again, this is your transaction. Tip number 5 is to confirm the details of a transaction before sending your money. Oftentimes, transactions are completed via direct message and email, and as a result, things can be lost in translation. For this reason, it's never a bad idea to confirm the details of what has been discussed, especially if that conversation took place over a period of time. By reiterating some of the details around the comic or the transaction or the method of shipping, this will go a long way towards helping make sure that you can complete a transaction successfully with as few problems as possible. At the end of the day, you as the buyer bear a lot of responsibility for the transactions that you enter into. It would be great if every seller were reputable, did the right thing, shipped books properly, were always trustworthy, and put your interests before their own. But unfortunately, for lots of different reasons, that isn't the world that we live in. And so as a buyer, you have to make sure that you are owning the transaction. You are bearing the responsibility for this. You are asking the questions. You are trusting your gut. You are asking for additional references or additional evidence if that is what you need to make sure that you can complete a transaction. As always, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to watch this video. I hope that you found it helpful, and if you did, I certainly want to encourage you to hit the thumbs up button and leave a comment behind. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel for some reason or another, I want to personally invite you to do that right now. That way you won't miss out on any of the content that comes out from the channel. As always, if you need to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.